In our discussions yesterday, we're trying to understand how to work with Luke 21, verses 25 and 26. I don't know if we're all comfortable now that we have evidence to show that verse 25, verse A and B, is a chiasm of verse 26, A and B. And we know that Sun, Moon and Stars is a clustering of events of 1798. And we've now hopefully shown, without even using Josiah Litch or early writings, that the distress of nations, if it's an event that follows the Sun, Moon and Stars, that it has all the characteristics, that it's the history of 1838 to 1840, where it has the nations that are in distress because of radicalized Egypt. Yesterday, my brother in the corner there, you wanted to read us a Spirit Prophecy quote?
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and read that. Tell us why we're reading it.
I think Lloyd was making it clear that most of the teachers who teach about the shaking of the heavens, they say that when the moon, stars, and the stars, volume of stars, and the darkening of the moon was the shaking of the powers of heaven. She says that it was the shaking of the powers of the earth, as people teach that it was the heavens that were being shaken. And so the heavens will be shaken by the voice of God at the end.
What document is this?
Let me look at it.
Did you say it was Experience and Views? I can't remember what passage you said.
Christ's Experience and Teachings, CET 111, paragraph 1 and 2.
Okay, I've got a feeling that's going to be just early writings, but we'll check that email. I think it's early. I think it's just early writings because it's just that book is just Christ.
Christian Experience and Teachings.
Yeah, I think it's just a compilation. So I'm just looking for Brother William. Disappeared. Did anybody find Josiah Litch's document? I saw him this morning. He's hiding somewhere. Has anybody's got Josiah Litch's document? We'll just read that. No? Do you have it? Reference?
Okay, Prex, that is Prophetic Exposition, Volume 1, 156, paragraph 1.
What's the code? PRX?
PREX 1.
PREX Volume 1, page
156, paragraph 1.
How does it begin?
It was the declaration of Bonaparte. Sorry. Upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity.
Upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, beginning with the French Revolution in 1789 to the close of Bonaparte's career in 1850, it is notorious that a time of dreadful trouble prevailed in the four quarters of the globe: Europe, Asia, Africa, and America. That war, which began in France, ere it ended, involved nearly the whole civilized world. Almost all the governments of Christendom were shaken to their very base. It was the declaration of Bonaparte at the time of the Revolution of November 1799 that nothing in history resembles the close of the 18th century. Europe was deluged with blood and millions of her sons fell upon the field of battle. Almost every sovereign of the continent of Europe was hurled from his throne or obliged to purchase the dishonourable peace of Europe's scourge. The intestine broils and civil commotions of the Ottoman Empire were fast bringing it to ruin. There was emphatically on earth distress of nations with perplexity. No nation could foresee for a day what would be its doom by the next day. All was fear and dismay. More than once, in the midst of the perplexity of the age and of our other distresses, our own country was startled by the report of Bonaparte's intention of crossing the Atlantic. So is that 1840? Isn't it talking about Napoleon Bonaparte?
Which is the Ottoman.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that, but it says it ends in 1815. I don't think that's the passage. So I don't think that's the right one. We'll wait for him to find it. Unless anybody else... No one's got it? Okay, I don't think that's the right passage. What we'll do is we'll go to Early Writings 41. So it's only two short paragraphs, Early Writings 41 and 42. Are you there? It's called The Shaking of the Powers of Heaven. December 16th, 1848. The Lord gave me a view of the shaking of the powers of the heavens. I saw that when the Lord said heaven, in giving the signs recorded by Matthew, Mark and Luke, he meant heaven. And when he said earth, he meant earth. The powers of heaven are the sun, moon and stars. They rule in the heavens. The powers of the earth are those that rule on the earth. The powers of heaven will be shaken at the voice of God. Then the sun, moon and stars will be moved out of their places. They will not pass away but be shaken by the voice of God. Dark heavy clouds came up and clashed against each other. The atmosphere parted and rolled back. Then we could look upon the open space in Orion, whence came the voice of God. The holy city will come down through that open space. I saw that the powers of earth are now being shaken, and that events come in order. Wars and rumours of wars, sword, famine and pestilence are first to shake the powers of the earth. Then the voice of God will shake the sun, moon and stars, and this earth also. I saw that the shaking of the powers of Europe is not, as some teach, the shaking of the powers of heaven, but is the shaking of the angry nations. So, who introduced that passage to us? There's a couple of people. Who wants to volunteer? Who did this for us? Okay, so you said that Luke 21, Revelation 11:18. Let's read Revelation 11:18. We didn't actually read that, I don't think. We read verse 14. The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. Dropping down to... Let me see if I want to drop down or read it all. So that's 14. The second woe is past, and the third woe come quickly. 15. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign for ever and ever. The 24 elders which sat before God on their seats fell upon their faces and worshipped God, saying, we give thee thanks, O Lord God Almighty, which art and wast and art to come, because thou hast taken to thee great power and hast reigned. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them that destroy the earth. And the temple of God was open in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. So you gave us Revelation 18. It says the angering of the nations were angry, and Luke 21:25 says, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. So we just read early writings. So you said that the distress of nations equals the angering of the nations. How do you see that? I don't know if I saw that directly from them.
When you read the quotation, they're not going to speak about the powers of heaven and the powers of earth. It's going to say that the powers of earth to be shaken, and that events to come in order. So the powers of earth is going to say that these are wars, rumors of war, so that form and pestilence are to shake the powers of the earth. Then the voice of God will shake the sun and moon. But this is applying the future. But picking up on Luke 21 is going to tell us that this distress of nations, this is the shaking of the power in Europe. And this is the shaking of the angry nations.
Say that again. You said something about Luke 21.
I say, when you saw the first quotation, page 41, is going to tell us that the Lord gave me a view of the shaking of the powers of heaven, and I saw
These signs are recorded in Matthew, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. This will tell us when he says heaven, he means heaven. And what says earth, he means earth. Then if you come to the next paragraph, paragraph 2, it's going to tell us something. It's going to tell us what it means heaven and what it means earth. But now there's a sentence that says, I saw that the parts of the earth are now being shaken and that the events come in order. So earlier on it said, I saw the parts of heaven now being shaken. Now being shaken, and the time that she's writing here is 1848, says now the parts of earth are being shaken and the events come in order. That's going to give us the parts of what are these parts of heaven on earth. So not heaven, on earth. Then says wars, rumors of wars, sword, famine, and pestilence are the first to shake the parts of the earth. Then the voice of God will shake the sun, moon, and stars. But when she says this, then she's speaking about the future when the voice of God is going to shake the sun, moon, and stars, of which we know that these already passed for 1848.
What's already passed?
The parts of heaven. Now, when she's commenting, she says, the voice of God is going to shake the sun, moon, and stars. But when she's making this comment, she's applying the future when the parts of heaven again are going to be shaken. Because now when she says now, it's 1848. And you know that the signs of the moon and the stars already done happened. Now she's saying they are going to be shaken in the ways of God in the future.
Okay. So the shaking of sun, moon, and stars is going to be in the future to 1848. Okay.
But now there's this last statement. It's going to tell us, I saw that the shaking of the powers of Europe is not, as some teach, the shaking of the powers of heaven. But these powers of heaven, you can see them in the book of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And these powers of the shaking of the powers of Europe, my contention is these are the distance of nation in the book of Luke 21. Because they are tied together with sun, moon, and stars. And when people in our age, they have thought that the shaking of the nations are also the shaking of the powers of heaven. But now she's going to clarify that this distance of nations, these are the shaking of the powers of Europe, which is the angry nations.
How do you get that? That's the distress of nations in Luke 21:25. I guess that's what I'm struggling. She doesn't say it explicitly.
She doesn't say, but when you look at the book of Luke 21, you see the powers of heaven, the sun, moon, and stars, but also being added another thing to the distance of nation. So this distance of nation, these are the powers of earth that Eleanor is commenting and taking the powers of God.
Where do you see that she's quoting the distress of nations in Luke 21? How are you drawing in Luke 21 to that passage? Because when she says Matthew, Mark, and Luke, she's only referring to heaven. I saw that when the Lord said heaven in the signs Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he meant heaven. And when he said earth, he meant earth.
Because in the book of Luke 21, Luke 21 says, and upon earth distance of nations. So Luke 21 is saying moon, stars, sun, moon, and stars, and upon earth distance of nations. So I think when she's saying this earth, she's meaning this distance of nations. Because he's speaking about earth, when it means God says earth is earth and says heaven is heaven. He's borrowing earth from the book of Luke 21.
Okay, so we'll stop there for a second. Who wants to make a comment on that?
Okay. They support in selected messages. 4:17 and it ties 21 verse 25 to the nations.
Let's just try and understand this passage before we go to another one. Who wants to make a comment on this one?
So I think if I'm understanding what Malio is saying, he said in giving the signs recorded by Matthew, Mark, Luke. So she first says, I saw that when the Lord said heaven, in giving the signs recorded by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So we have to go back to these books and see what did they say concerning heaven. She clarifies and says they are speaking about the sun, the moon, and the stars. So she says he meant heaven, and we say earth. Now if you go with this phrase back to Matthew, Mark, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So when you see specifically Luke addressing the earth, you get addressing the distress of nations.
So in that passage, when she says, when the Lord said heaven, in quotation, and that's recorded in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he meant heaven, so that's straightforward. And when he said earth, where does he say earth? In quotation. Because that's not in Matthew or Mark, is it? So she's only saying Matthew, Mark, and Luke for the heaven bit, and then she's not clarifying where the earth bit is found. She's just saying that's in. We're having to make the assumption that she's only referring here to Luke, because it's not in Matthew and Mark. Agree with that?
Yeah.
So it's not worded very well, I don't think, because it seems to infer that earth should be in those three books as well, because he didn't say earth in Matthew, Mark.
So now then she says, so the earth is in the book of Luke. But I'm saying, even if that was the case, then this will shift the distress of nation to 1848 to 1840. She's saying in 1848, the shaking of the powers of Europe or something, the shaking of the powers of heaven. I think what she will be speaking about here, 1848 was the year of revolutions in Europe. Mm-hmm. So she will be referred. If we do that, that has to shift to 1848, not 1840.
So we've got heaven in those three books, and we're saying just earth in the one book. And we're just saying that because we can only find the earth in that one book. If you were to read that, would you assume that she's talking that she says earth is in all three books? If you were going to read that as it's written, because that's how I would have read that. Yep. No. Where's Robert? No what? No comment. Okay. My brother, the back.
I agree. It is art referring to Luke. Some Luke who has art. That this art must be worshiping me.
Luke is the only one that has earth, isn't he? I'm not missing something. The other ones don't talk about earth, do they?
Yeah.
The other ones do Matthew or Mark, Luke talk about earth, or have I just missed it somewhere? So I couldn't see it anywhere in those two books. So if we go with that, because no one's speaking, that the earth is only in Luke. The powers of heaven are the sun, moon, and stars. They rule in the heavens. The powers of earth are those that rule on the earth. The powers of heaven will be shaken at the voice of God. Then the sun, moon, and stars will be moved out of their places. They will not pass away but be shaken by the voice of God. So all she's clarifying in the next part of that paragraph is what the powers of heaven are. So she's telling us that the sun, moon and stars, and she says what the powers of earth are. Powers of earth are those that rule on the earth. The powers of heaven shall be shaken. So what's she saying in that first paragraph? So what are you saying, Brother Rogers?
So I was saying, if like the question we had is, where do we locate the distress of nations in Luke 21? And someone pointed us to the book of Handwritings 41. But I'm saying if we were to go by Handwritings 41, it couldn't locate the distress of nations in 1840. To locate in 1840.
So tell me the logic that you're locating it in 1848 from that paragraph.
Okay, so if you come here, she says, when the Lord said heaven in giving the signs recorded by Matthew, Mark and Luke, so we can see that they all speak about heaven. And she has even clarified that the powers of heaven is the sun, the moon, and the stars. He meant heaven, and when he said earth, so what we have agreed on is that when you go to look at earth, only Luke speaks of it. And I think he speaks of it on two instances, like we have done it on the board. There is the earth where we have the distress of nations, and then we have the next earth. So that even leaves which earth are we going to pick? Is it the first one or the second one located in 1848? So if you pick the earth and assume that it is the first earth which is the distress of nations, if you continue, she will go down there and say that the shaking of the powers of Europe. Down. It says, I saw that the shaking of the powers of Europe is not as some take the shaking of the powers of heaven, but it's the shaking of the angry nations. We know the powers of Europe are the powers that are ruling on earth. So then if you want to take that first earth, it would shift to 1848, where she's repeating the shaking of the powers of Europe.
And you're saying that's verse 25?
If we are picking the first earth.
Okay, Brother Kefas?
Read the first line. She said that when the Lord said in heaven, in giving the signs, in Mark, Matthew, and Luke, he meant heaven, and when he meant earth. So if you read the passage, it kind of appears like the word earth also right in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But
The word what?
earth. But in the actual sense, when you go into those classes, the word earth is very different. So it's kind of a bit difficult, but you apply the earth, the angry of the nations, that's for the shaking of the power of the earth to be part of the distress, unless we get another explanation, another influence that can connect, give us that connection.
So what I find funny is we're going to use early writings to try and explain these verses, and we don't even know what early writing says. It seems, and because now you say we need to go to another reference to try and work out what early writing says, and early writings was supposed to be the explanation of these verses. So to me, this is another example of the difficulty of using spirit of prophecy to explain the Bible, because often her own words and don't seem that clear to me. Anybody got any comment? I'm sure when we first did this, 4 or 5 people took us to Early Writings 41, and all those people are silent now. And I want to know why. Come on, who told us Early Writings? And why are you so silent now? No one? Is this too difficult? Okay.
Say something.
Oh, by the way, was that passage that you had? Is that early writings?
Yeah.
It's the same one. Okay.
The same one. I can try and argue that the shaking that we are seeing here, according to the conclusion that I'm seeing, is that we cannot differentiate why, or was it the shaking of the earth or the shaking of the heavens when the stars were falling and the moon was darkening and the reddening of the sun. I mean, the sun was darkening and the reddening of the moon. But I'm trying to argue that whatever happened in Europe, the falling of the stars, that was not the shaking of the powers of heaven. Because we know that the shaking of the powers of heaven is moving them out of their place. And because they darkened, doesn't mean that they were moved out of their place. But it is the voice of God that will remove them out of their place. So the shaking that happened was the shaking of the powers of Europe that ruled the earth. And that shaking was caused by the distress of nations.
Okay. Give me a second. So let's go back to that early writings passage. She has a vision. Do we all agree with that? Yeah? What's the vision on? What did she have a vision about? She's quite specific. She says, the Lord showed me, I had a view of the shaking of the powers of heaven. So I'm going to argue that she doesn't have a view of the earth. The Lord shows her about heaven. If we're okay with that. And she's having this December 16th, 1848. So, why is she even having this view from God? What's the backdrop of all of this? Why is God showing her what the shaking of the powers of heaven are?
Some are teaching error.
Who said that? Someone's teaching error.
Because someone is understanding the shaking of the powers of Europe and the shaking of the powers of heaven, according to the last statement of the paragraph.
So it's Bates that's doing this, I believe. And I've lost a reference where Bates is doing this. That's what I was just trying to find. I can't find that directly. So if you go to the last part of paragraph 2, I saw that the shaking of the powers of earth is not, as some teach, the shaking of the powers of heaven, but it's the shaking of the angry nations. So there's nowhere that says the shaking of the, I'll just say the shaking of the earth. There's nowhere that says that in any of the Bible passages. So what people are doing is taking the passage which is from Matthew, Mark and Luke, the shaking of the heavens, and they're making that what? They're saying the shaking of heaven equals what? Equals the shaking of the earth. And then she says, it's not, did she say the shaking of the earth? I don't think she says that, does she?
She said she did.
She says that? Did she say the shaking of the earth?
Shaking of the powers, powers.
Oh, yes. She said war, and rumors of war, sword, famine, pestilence, and first to shake the powers of the earth.
I saw that the powers of earth are now being shaken, and that the events come in their order. Okay, so yeah, she does say that. So someone says the shaking of heaven is the shaking of earth, and it's specifically Europe. And she says, God showed me. What did God show her?
That's what teaching that.
Sorry?
How the powers of heaven will be shaken. She's shown a view of the shaking of the powers of heaven, which is different from what people have been teaching.
So all she's shown is this. She's shown the shaking of the heaven. And the shaking of the heaven is what? It's the sun, moon and stars. So he showed her that. What else was she shown?
I can see she was shown also the shaking of the cloud here.
Where do you see that? Who said that?
In the middle of the paragraph.
Paragraph 1 or 2?
Paragraph 2, she says, I saw that the powers of the earth are now being shaken, and that event come in order. And then she says now the things that shake it, which is war, rumors of war, sword, famine, pestilence, and then she says are fast to shake the power of the earth.
Do you agree with that? Halfway into the paragraph when she says, I saw that the powers of earth are now being shaken. Is this what God showed her, or is that what she's just seeing? Brother Robert? Sorry?
If she's seeing, she's being shown.
Well, she said at the beginning of the paragraph, the Lord showed me the heavens. She didn't mention the earth. In paragraph 2, she says, all she just says then is, I saw the powers of earth are now being shaken. So is that part of her same vision? Brother Rogers?
The fact that she says, I saw, I believe she's in vision.
Okay, so everybody agree with that? Anyone got a different view? So she's going to be shown what earth is and what heaven is. So she's shown that the heaven is the sun, moon and stars. What else is she shown about heaven?
The voice of God.
Sorry?
The powers of heaven are shaken at the voice of God.
So she tells you what they are, and then she says when they're shaken. She says what they are and when they're shaken. And they're shaken at the voice of God. Then she tells you when. Then what does she tell? Then what other information do we have? Sorry?
What the shaking of the powers of heaven mean?
And what do they mean?
She said, the sun, the moon, and the stars will be moved out of their places.
So she says when, and then she says what. They're going to be moved. What else?
Also that they will not pass away.
They're not going to be passed, they're not going to be destroyed, they're just moved. Anything else? Sorry? I just do with the heavens first. Just want to do the heavens first. What about the beginning of the second paragraph? Dark heavy clouds came up and clashed against each other. The atmosphere parted and rolled back. Then we could look up through the open space in Orion, whence came the voice of God. The holy city will come down through that open space. So she tells you when the voice of God is. So she says, when it's shaken, is it the voice of God? And when's the voice of God? When the atmosphere is, you say, rolled back. When does that happen? When is the atmosphere rolled back? It must be the second coming. Can we show that from the Bible?
Version 6.
Sorry?
Version 6.
Verse 14. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. The kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains of the mighty men, and every bondman and every freeman hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks and the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, hide us.
Starts from verse 12.
Sorry?
Starts from verse 12.
And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth, and the hair of hair, and the moon became as blood. Verse 12 is where?
17.
So isn't that back? Is that back here? First part of 25, or is that future?
17.
When the sixth seal is opened.
Then verse 13.
How are you reading verse 12?
Verse 12.
Okay, so you read it the same way. Verse 13, and the stars of heaven fell upon the earth as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs. What's that? So that's past as well. And then 14, and the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. So is that what she's referring to here? The atmosphere parted and rolled back. Is that how we understand that?
Yes.
So this is Revelation 6:14.
Now, then verse 15 shows the powers that rule upon earth.
And then 15 he's talking about the earth.
Yeah.
So the passage itself isn't going to tell us when that happens, does it? So do we know when that's going to happen?
At the voice of God.
So we know it's at the voice of God, but when does all of that happen?
After the seven last plagues.
Okay, can we show that?
Revelation 16.
How do we show that's the plagues?
Revelation 16.
Which verse?
How do you treat Isaiah 34 verse 4?
Hi here.
How do you treat Isaiah 34 verse 4? Isaiah 34 verse 4.
Oh, sorry. Isaiah 34 verse 4. Begin at verse 1, Isaiah 34 verse 1. Come near, all nations, to hear, and hearken, you people. Let the earth hear, and all that is in, all that therein, the world and all things that come forth of it. For the indignation of the Lord is upon all nations, and his fury upon all their armies. He hath utterly destroyed them, and hath delivered them to the slaughter. Their slain also shall be cast out, and their stink shall come up out of their carcasses, and the mountains shall be melted with their blood. And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their host shall fall down as the leaf falleth off from the vine, and as a falling fig from the fig tree. For my sword shall be bathed in heaven, till it shall come down upon Idumea, and upon the people of my curse to judgment. So you brought us to Isaiah 34 verse 4, and how are we tying that to Revelation 6?
I think it was this point of, so first of all I asked, how do you treat Isaiah 4 verse 4? So it was a question, but there was this issue of the atmosphere being rolled back. You can see in Isaiah 4 verse 4, so the heavens are rolled together as a scroll. So how do you relate it to what we are discussing?
So they seem to be parallel verses.
Yeah.
Agree with that?
Yeah, it's boring.
So the only thing I noticed is in Isaiah it talks about the fig tree, and verse 13 also speaks about the fig tree. Revelation 6.
6:13.
But we said Revelation 6:13 was 1833, and Isaiah 34 verse 4 is placing that at the same time as the heavens. Does that make sense?
Isaiah verse 4 has a Lord.
Sorry?
Has a Lord.
Has a?
It talks about the host of heaven shall be dissolved. We know the host of heaven, that's the sun, moon, and the stars, which we know now it has not yet been dissolved. Maybe, dissolved means something else. And the heaven shall be rolled together as a scroll. As that one is still future, isn't it? And all their hosts shall fall down. All, the word all means all. But in 1843, we know it's the stars which fell. 1833b, and has the leaf fallen off from the vine, and has a falling fig from the fig tree.
In early writings, she said they will not pass away but be shaken. And in Isaiah it says they're going to be dissolved.
You connect. Isaiah says, and all the host of heaven shall be dissolved. 2 Peter 3:12 says, the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat.
Sorry?
2 Peter 3:12.
Looking for and hastening unto the coming of of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to this promise, look for the new heavens and the new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. Wherefore, beloved, seeing that ye look for such things, be diligent that ye may be found of him in peace. You said verse 14?
12. Isaiah 34 says, all the host of heaven shall be dissolved.
So it's 11 and 12. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation? So that's verse 10. You have to go. You have to go from. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the great day of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. So you're saying Isaiah 34 what?
Verse 4. And so verse 8. And
Sorry? Verse
4. All the host of heaven shall be dissolved. So you will
How do we connect that with Peter? I don't know.
In Isaiah chapter 34 verse 8 can help us show when that event will happen. Because it says that for it's the day of the Lord, virgins, and the year of recompense for the controversy of Zion. We know these are the judgments wherewith God avenges his judge. Yeah? But we know all this will happen during the 7 last plagues.
Can we show that? It's in the 7 last plagues. Can you see that in Revelation 16?
Because we can logically ask if God is to dissolve the heavens and the earth at this time, then other events will not be fulfilled, which are already prophesied that they will.
I agree. Logically, we can show that. Ellen White will show that as well. But I'm just asking if if the verses would show that.
In Revelation 16.
Does it tell us in Revelation 16? I don't know if it gives us all that information in 16, does it?
The only thing that can connect us to Revelation says from verse 16 is verse 20. And every island fled away, and the mountains are not found. And in Revelation chapter 6, verse 14, it says, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places.
Revelation 6 verse 14. So we've got enough information to know that the shaking of the heavens is in the history of the 7 plagues, or Jacob's time of trouble. Does anybody want to make any more comment on that?
Revelation 16 verse 17. That's when God speaks.
And the 7th angel poured out his vial in the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, "It is done."
Then 18, and there were voices and thunder lightning, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth. And so mighty an earthquake, and so great, and the great city was divided into 3. The city of the nation fell, and the great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of Israel. And every highland fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent, and men blasphemed God because of the plagues of the hail. For the plagues thereof was exceedingly great.
So it's not just the seven plagues, it's the 7th plague. We know that happens in the 7th plague. So coming back to the early writings quote, In 1848, the Lord showed me that the shaking of the powers of heaven was going to happen during the 7th plague. Are we okay with that? The powers of earth are those that rule on the earth. Second paragraph. She then talks about the history of the 7th plague. The holy city will come down through that open space. She's just telling you what's going to happen when that, because that's 1,000 years later. I saw that the powers of earth are now being shaken, and that the events come in order. War and rumours of wars, sword, famine and pestilence are the first to shake the powers of the earth. So when she says that the events come in order, what events are going to come in order? What are the events that come in order? What events is she referring to?
I think the changing of the powers of earth and the taking of the powers of earth.
So the events are earth then heaven. Anyone else?
So the event that I can order the event that shaking the earth.
Sorry, I think.
I'm saying the event that comes in order, the event that shaking the earth.
And what are those events then?
Okay. A war was a war, sword, famine, and pestilence.
Okay, so you're saying they're the ones that are coming in order. So you're reading it differently to my brother here. Yeah, you're reading it differently. So you're saying first comes war, then rumours of wars, then sword, then famine, and then pestilence. Yeah? When you follow through that sentence, it says, wars, rumours, wars, sword, famine, pestilence are the first to shake the powers of the earth. So isn't it saying that all of those things are the first thing without giving an order of them?
Yeah.
Sorry? I didn't hear you?
First to shake the powers of earth. Sword, famine are the first to shake the powers of earth.
Okay. And then it says, then
Then the voice will shake the sun, moon, and stars.
So,
and what else will it shake?
heaven. So, I agree with that.
And what else will it shake?
And this earth.
Earth.
So the sequence of events are what? What's the first thing?
The rumors of war.
So it's those things that are happening on the earth first, then the shaking of the heaven, and then the shaking of the earth, and this earth also. So what are the events then that are going to come in order?
Okay, the event that will come in order. Okay, and the event that we have seen, the first to shake the earth, and then the voice that will shake the earth.
Okay, so what's the first event then? Do we agree that the first event is wars, rumours of wars, sword, famine, and pestilence? Do we agree that that's the first event? Yeah? What produces that first event, my sister? What's producing that first event?
shaking of the powers of the earth.
Sorry?
Shaking of the powers of the earth.
So but the shaking of the powers of the earth is wars, rumours of wars, etc. What produces that shaking? My brother? What produces that shaking?
Distress of nations.
Distress of nations?
Yeah, the same.
The same?
Angry of nations.
The nations?
Against nations.
So if people get angry, that's going to cause pestilence?
It's going to cause the wars.
Yeah, but it's not just wars. I've got famine and pestilence.
Famine and pestilence, those are natural disasters.
The what?
They are natural disasters that comes from the earth.
They're natural disasters. Sorry?
But they shape the earth. The Parminder and the pestilence. They also shape the earth.
Yeah, so all of those things shape the earth. All I'm asking is what produces those things?
Okay, you also reason like them that is damage of the nation, and you also be seeing that the famine and the pestilences can result also from wars and rumors of wars, like what we experienced in South Sudan some time back. So when you expose yourself to wars and fighting, you'll also be getting famine, and you'll also be getting pestilences as well.
So the cause of them is what?
It's the anger of the nation.
Is the angering of the nations. Anyone else got any thoughts on that? What produces or what shakes the earth?
It's not the person rather than the organization.
Sorry, it's
not, what I want to say is not the person rather than the organization. It's the withdrawal of the Holy Spirit.
It's the what? Withdrawal of the Holy Spirit. So that's why I'm asking for people's opinions on what it is. So you've got a passage, you're going to...
Yeah,
Hey, my brother?
I'm confused.
You're confused?
The rumors of war and the wars, we marked them primarily from verse
Here?
of the disciples.
Yes.
But where are we now?
We're here.
Why? That's why.
You have to, that's why I don't like... No, I'm not going to say that because people will tell me off. That's the problem when you use Spirit of Prophecy. She just mixes things up and doesn't do things in kind of strict order or explain things. So we've kind of... The reason why we're stuck with that question is because we didn't still finish what all of these things are. So if we'd done that, we've sort of gone backwards. So if we just go with how she's doing it, because I was wondering when people were going to notice that. If we just give her the license to go with that, we'll try and explain. Hopefully, we're going to get an explanation why she's doing that. I think it's not that big an issue. So if we just assume that we've got wars and rumours of wars in this history, because that's where we are, we'll try and find out why she's doing that afterwards. If that's the only confusion that you have.
So she's making an application.
Yeah.
You said we must understand the life of Christ.
We must understand. Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Because we were looking at this structure here, which is that we're trying to understand the natural sequence of things, it's taken us to see what the distress of nations is. And it seems to me that the distress of nations was 1840, which was Islam. And as soon as you start doing that, then people start going to Revelation 11:18, because it's got the distress of the nation and the angering of the nations. And the reason they're doing that is because of the shaking of the powers of heaven. So what we've done is we're trying to go through some Bible verses to try and work out verses in this history. And to help us, we're going to a Spirit of Prophecy quote, But the Spirit of Prophecy quote has already jumped 2 steps ahead of us, and she's already put an application in there to say that there's wars and rumours of wars. So we've gone 2 steps further than we should have done to try and explain how these verses are working. So hopefully that might make a bit of sense. Have you found the passage? So wars, rumours of wars, sword, famine and pestilence are the first to shake the powers of heaven. Then the voice of God will shake the sun, moon and stars, and this earth also. So how many steps are there? There's 3 steps. So there's 1 which is earth, and then there's 2. There's 2 and 3. Is the heaven before the earth? Or at the same time? I'll put them. Sorry?
It's just like that.
It is? Last sentence. I saw that the shaking of the powers of Europe is not as some teach, the shaking of the powers of heaven, but it's the shaking of the angry nations. How do we know this is, she's talking about 1848, the year of revolution? Does everybody know 1848 is the year of revolution? Yeah? How do we know that she's talking about the year of revolution? What clues do we have? Europe?
She says that the powers are now being shaken. Now.
Where did she say that?
The 3rd sentence, 2nd paragraph.
I saw that the powers of earth are now being shaken, and that event is coming order.
So we've got the word now, and we've got the word Europe. Everybody, is that enough evidence that she's talking about the year of European revolutions? Yeah? Okay with that? So how does that come back into Matthew 25 and move that? I'm going to ask, because you said it moves it.
So I'm saying, when you go to the book of Early Writings, page 41, she's going to speak about the earth. But in our analysis, we have 2 earths. The one where we have the distress of nations, and we have the one that is going to cause, the one that is going to cause men's heart to fail for fear, for looking after those things that are coming on the earth. So I don't know if we have enough information from that quotation to decide which earth is she referring to when she starts seeing that vision. Is it the first one or the second?
Okay, so what did we learn about the second one? The men's hearts failing them for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. What do we say about that?
We have 2 ideas of it. So we saw a cause and effect. Men's hearts are failing them for fear, for looking after those things. Because they are looking after those things which are coming on the earth. Also because they are looking after those things which are going to happen to the powers of heaven. Or we showed that there is a cause and effect between earth and heaven, where something is going to happen on the earth as a result of the shaking of the powers of heaven.
So what we did was, we tied the shaking of the powers of heaven with the men's hearts failing them on earth through the wording. It says, and looking after those things which are coming on the earth, so they can see things that are coming on the earth, because the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So the word for is because. So Brother Robert wanted to make it are coming on the earth. He wanted to make it what? Present continuous.
I was just saying that it can be.
Okay, if it's present continuous, how does that change what we said?
Let me look at it.
Okay? All I'm asking is, verse 26, we've connected these two things together. That the shaking of the heavens is connected to men's hearts failing them. They're both future events. And the shaking of the heavens here, we know is in the 7th plague, at the very end of the world. So, therefore, the men's hearts failing them must be in connection with that event. Is that reasonable?
So I don't think it changes the fact that those two are the inherent means are feeling them in the future. But what I was saying is that when it says, and looking after those things which are coming on the earth, it is in that time, it is present continuous tense, not in our time, but in that time when all those things are coming. So I was saying that cannot be used as an argument for us right now to say that it's in the future.
Did everybody understand that? Did anybody understand that?
Yeah.
So, the last part of that verse says, I believe these things that they are looking at, they are happening now, then. And the last part says, for the powers of heaven shall. Still that means in future. It's future, but then they'll be looking at them going on present continuous.
The problem when we say it's future to whom? It's future to AD 31, isn't it? Because you're just saying this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. So it's all future. Because we can't suddenly transport ourselves into Millerite history and say verse 26 is future to Millerite history, because we're not in Millerite history, we're in the history of Christ here. Does that make sense? Yeah?
I don't think these words coming and shall are safe ones to use to say in the future, because this is Christ speaking, and when he's speaking, everything is in the future.
Yes. So are you agreeing with what I just said? We're here in 31 and everything's in the future.
Okay.
Yeah?
Then what is the purpose of understanding all these things? Because all these things brings us to verses 25.
We did all these things from a Spirit of Prophecy quote. All these things, if you checked what the scripture said, I don't know if it's as easy to work that out. It's that Spirit of Prophecy quote, Desire of Ages. That was tying that all together, which is why I don't like using the Spirit of Prophecy so early into a study, because you end up not thinking.
So we are not in AD 31. All these things, you're saying that from verse 29.
Yeah, but we're not in verse 34. We're still back in verse 29. So we're putting all these things to one side for the moment. We're not looking at what all the things are, if it's this one or this one or this one, 1, 2 or 3. All we're just looking at is this passage here. What we have established is that the shakings of the heaven is here at the end of the world. It's future to verse 25. We know that. And then we know that in verse 26, the first part, it says, and looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. So, what is present continuous? I have no idea what present continuous means. Tell us what that means.
What the word present continuous means?
It's not the word, it's the grammatical language or whatever. It's not a particular word.
Grammar.
Am I saying it right? Present continuous? Is that? What does that mean?
That something is happening at the moment, and it's something that is in continuity. For example, I'm currently studying, and my studies are on course, then I've not finished my studies, so it's present and it still continues. So, yeah, that's how I understand it. So it's something that is in the present, but it's still continuing, and the word coming can be used for that.
So, if we're going to use that here, those things which are coming on the earth, what's coming on the earth? Unless anywhere else. What's coming on the earth? Shaking? But that's heaven. So what's coming on earth?
Something is happening on earth as a result of the shaking of the parts of heaven.
So it doesn't give us the details, but something's happening on earth in connection with something that's happening in heaven. We can prove that. Because it says the word for, because, so it's connecting something that's going to happen on earth. We know it's going to happen because something's happening in heaven. But it doesn't tell us what's happening on earth in that passage. We okay with that? What is happening on earth? Not from that passage, because we've already studied it here.
I think what is happening on earth, if I will connect Luke 21 to Revelation 6, in verse 26 of Luke 21, men's hearts are filling them for fear. In Revelation 6, we see that the kings of the earth, all these men, are hiding themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and saying to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that's seated on the throne. So I'm saying that it is because of that they are hiding because they're in fear. And they are hiding because every mountain and island is being moved out of their places. And something that is the shaking of the powers of the earth that is happening at the same time as the powers of the heavens are being shaken.
Are we all okay with that?
Okay. You showed that 3 steps, that the earth, heaven, and then the earth. For me, I would say that the first earth would mean the stress of nations. And the stress can mean the shaking of angry nations caused by rumors of wars, which leads to men's hearts to fail because of the fear what is coming.
Okay, you said distress. I don't know where you got distress from. Because if you're going to go from the Spirit of Prophecy quote, she just says angry.
Oh yeah, it's hungry of nations.
Okay.
Then this heaven, there would mean, which would be shaken at the voice of God. The sun, moon, and stars would be shaken there. Then as a result, we see because it said also, and this earth also shall be shaken at the voice of God. So the earth has the third step that would mean the earthquake, the highlands being moved away from their places, and the mountains which shall also be moved away.
So the voice of God shakes the heaven and it shakes the earth. That's how she's using that passage. And we've got men's hearts failing them. We can tie that in with Revelation 6:14 and all the other pieces of information that we had. We had Isaiah 34, verse 4. We can locate that because it's the day of God's vengeance, verse 8. So we're happy to tie these two together at the very end of the world. We can prove that.
Yeah.
So coming back to the early writings passage, she says the shaking of the powers of Europe now is not the shaking of the heavens, which is going to happen at the end of the world, but it's the nations are angry.
Yes.
What's making the nations angry? Sorry?
I think that yesterday we understood that there is that what angers the nations is Islam.
But we just heard someone said now being shaken in 48, and it's Europe, the European nations, and that are the ones that are angry. So is Islam making Europe angry in 1848? I don't think it is.
So I got the quote.
Okay, good.
I think it's quote that we will answer the question.
Sorry, the quote can...
Yeah, you can answer your question.
Okay, so the question I was asking is, wars, rumors of wars, sword, famine, pestilence is the first, and what produces that? What causes that?
So in CHS, Christian service.
CHS.
52.3.
CHS 52. Point 3. The time is at hand when there will be sorrow in the world that no human balm can heal. The Spirit of God is being withdrawn. Disasters by sea and by land follow one another in quick succession. How frequently we hear of earthquakes, tornadoes, destruction by fire and flood, the great loss of life and property. Apparently these calamities are capricious outbreaks of disorganized, unregulated forces of nature, wholly beyond the control of man. But in them all God's purposes may be read. They're among the agencies by which he seeks to arouse men to a sense of their danger.
So, this calamity is according to God. She's saying it's caused by the Holy Spirit, or the Spirit of God is being withdrawn. And then when the Spirit of God is withdrawn, the restraint.
And that's not in the case.
So let him finish. Carry on.
But the restraint that is placed upon the earth by the Spirit of God is removed, and then disasters by sea and by land follow one another.
When the Spirit of God is withdrawn, why does that produce all of these things?
The restraint that the Holy Spirit puts.
So once the restraint's taken away, why do bad things happen? Is it because nature, like earthquakes, are being held or prevented from happening because the Holy Spirit is stopping earthquakes? So if he says, I'm not going to stop them anymore, they're just going to happen by natural consequences? Or is there a power or force that's...
So, according to how I understand it, when the Holy Spirit is removed, another force, or another force takes control, and that's the forces of Satan.
Okay, so you're going to say that Satan's going to be producing all of these things. What were you saying? Nothing? Okay.
If I'm understanding you correctly, you're asking for the immediate cause, not the underlying cause. The underlying cause is the Spirit of God being within that. Are you asking for the immediate cause of the end of the revelation? In terms of what is happening in you?
I was asking both. First I was trying to say, because it's not just the immediate cause. There's wars, rumours of wars, sword, famine, pestilence. All of those things shake the powers of earth. That's the first event. Then the second event is the voice of God and the earth. Because she says, I saw the powers of earth are now being shaken, the events come in order. And I was just asking what the events were that are going to come in order. And it seemed to me, 1, 2, 3, the powers of earth, then the powers of heaven, then the powers of earth. These ones are being produced by the voice of God. What's producing this shaking on earth? That was what my question was. Because it tells you what the shaking is. It's, I don't know if we're going to say sword is war. It's basically war, famine and pestilence. those three things which shake the earth, what produces them? And what are you saying?
I was just trying to understand.
Okay. So it's not just the immediate context, it's those three things which shake the earth. What produces that?
Okay, from that Luke 21 verse 25, we located until the last the last sign, that was 1833, and then from 1833 the history will tell us what happened in the sequential, in order, the events that took place.
You're not going to answer my question, are you? Well, my question is what's shaking the power of earth? What produces war? What produces famine? And what produces pestilence?
Okay, you can say it is the powers of earth, that is the nations.
Human beings are doing that. You're saying human beings produce pestilence, yes, and they produce famine, and they produce war.
Yes.
We established the shaking of the powers of heaven. The event is taking place during the period of the last 7 plagues.
Yes.
So I could say the outpouring of the plagues will cause the shaking.
Of?
The outpouring of the plagues.
Produce the shaking of what?
Of the earth.
Okay, that's this one. It's not this one. The plague is producing this one, verse 26, but the plagues are not producing verse 25. The distress of nations here is different, and it's different to 1848.
Could it be the 7th trumpet?
Islam?
Not really Islam, but the angering of the nations there is. You find it in the book. I don't know if it's the same one that is in the book of Revelation chapter 11, and the nations are angered as a result of the 7th trumpet.
So that's the other question, is if you're going to put Revelation 11:18 here, is that talking about 1848?
11.
Because 11:8.
The 7th trumpet begins to blow in 1844.
Yeah. So you're in the same history.
Yeah.
The history works. So, because we don't normally put verse 18 as 1848.
But early writings, page 36. Anyway, I don't.
Verse 36. I don't know what verse 36 says.
I mean, page 36 says that these events come in their order, and the first one is the nations were angry and they are.
Oh, verse 41, you mean? Or verse 36? Oh, 36 says it.
36
okay.
Says that these events that are in verse 18 come in there in sequential order. The first one is the angering of the nations. The second is the wrath is come, and the wrath of God is the 7 last plagues. So I don't see a problem of having the nations being angry in 1848. I don't see how it does come to that unless I'm misunderstanding.
It does harm to verse 18?
Yeah.
It doesn't do. It doesn't. If verse 18 was the angering of the nations in 1848, that's fine. But we normally attach it to the third woe, the 7th trumpet, don't we?
Yes.
Because we normally say the reason why the nations are angry is because they're coming against radical Islam today, the third woe. That's what we normally apply. That's what I thought we normally did.
Okay.
Is that what we normally do? Yeah?
Yeah, but
maybe we're wrong.
No, we're not wrong.
We're not wrong.
Because in Revelation 11 verse,
okay,
when you see the 7th plague,
let me just finish.
He's saying that in Revelation chapter 11 verse 15, you can locate where the seventh angel sounded.
1844?
Yeah, around 1844. So the whole.
Sorry, not around. No, not around 1844.
So
October 22nd.
Yeah, from 1844 and 1848. You see all that. That's the history of the sounding of the what? of the seventh angel. And then in verse 18, right there where you can see, and the nations were angry.
Yep.
Down up to verse 18.
Yeah.
See the nation getting angry. And then you say, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the day that they should be judged, and that they should give their reward. So, the anger of the nations is in the history of the seventh angel.
Yeah.
It starts from 18 chapter 4, and I see.
That's what we said a minute ago. So we're okay with that. But what year is that? What event is the angering of the nations? Is it 1848? Or is it 9/11?
Yeah, then you must find out that.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you can apply Revelation 11:18 to 18:48. Considering the context that we are in at now, we are considering the books of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And we have not yet agreed on what this generation is, but if we are going to agree, that we assume that this generation is 17 to the second advent, then you have to have that verse fitting in within that history. And we suggested that the second advent, if everything was okay and they would have done their job well, it will happen in 1863. So you have to bring the angering of the nations in 11:18 and put it within that history. That's what we make an application in our history to Islam, but I don't think necessarily it means Islam. It would have meant something else to that history. Maybe to the year of revolutions.
So you're choosing 1840.
Sorry?
What my brother Roger said, initially he said it's 1840. So it's like now it's shifting. It's 1840.
No, I don't.
No. What he said before, he was attaching the distress of nations, and the reason he was doing that is because verse 25 is the only place you see earth. So he's not resolving that issue, because we're talking about Revelation 11, not Luke 21. In Luke 21, you've still got that problem. He hasn't resolved that. He's just said, if you're doing this one, it's 1848.
So when you go to early writings page 41, she says that the nations are now being angered. So I wonder where she gets that language of nations getting angry. And if you go to early writings page 36, where she's commenting on verse 18 of 11, again she says that the nations are now getting angry, but when the high priest has finished his work in the sanctuary, he will stand up and then the seven last plagues will come. So again, the angering of the nations in the context of Revelation chapter 18 verses, Revelation 11 verses 18, again she says now, which is in around that year of 1848. So I think it's 1848, and when we do it at 9/11, probably we make an application. Because in my mind, 9/11, the four winds were ready to be let loose. And if the four winds would have been let loose, that would have been the wrath of God coming. And the wrath of God needs to have been preceded by the angering of the nation. So I still think that is 1848.
Okay, so
I'm understanding it that the powers of heaven are shaken by the voice of God. Whoever rules in heaven is shaking the powers of heaven. And we have seen that the powers of the earth are shaken by the shaking of angry nations. So my argument is, when you read Luke 21:26, we are finding men's heart. I think those who are ruling on earth now are men's heart, and their activities, wicked activities, are the ones that are going to shake the powers of the earth by these natural calamities that are happening. I think when we apostatize, the Holy Spirit is withdrawn, and so we are left to follow our own hearts, and that men are following their own hearts, and this is causing the calamities. And I tend to believe the anger now of God, that He shake the powers of heaven, it's because as a result of what is happening on earth. And He's going to punish these nations and these wicked men that are performing these things.
So that's fine, but you disagree with Sister Joy, where she's saying that men's hearts are failing them because what's coming on the earth And what's coming on the earth is that the heavens are shaking, and that they're saying the earth is about to be destroyed. And that's what that verse is here, which is in the 7th plague.
Yeah, but men's heart are feeling them, but why are they feeling them? Because of the events that are coming. But now I'm focusing on what they have been doing.
Oh, okay, because when you said men's hearts fading, I thought you were playing 26 to the present day.
No, I'm saying no. Men's heart on verse 26 I've just used the men's heart. Because we know that when men follow their own heart, they devise wicked plans. And so these wicked things they are doing, that is what is causing the shaking of the powers of the earth, and it is the angering of the nations. That's why when you look at 1848, it's when there was the revolutions, the war, such things.
Okay, so we better stop here because...
I just want to give a bit of information that might help. When you look at the word distress, it means one things. It means put together, restraint, or anxiety, or anguish.
So we looked at that yesterday, where we've got this word distress here, and it has this kind of concept of you're all being confined or funneled together. So I did a little picture that you're all separate, and then you all go down this funnel, and you all come together, which means you press together or you're bound together, because it has the context of binding. And what was the other one you said?
Anguish.
So it's got anguish and restraint. So the restraining is that you're restrained because you're all together. I'm not saying you're saying this, but sometimes when we pick up these like definitions and we say restraint, then that means it's the restraining of Islam. But I think the people who are actually being restrained in that context is the nations that are being restrained. They're being restrained not by Islam. I'm not using the word restrain as we would normally use it. The word restrain means that you're being forced. Circumstances are forcing you to make a decision, and the decision that you're being forced to make is you're all coming together to deal with this subject.
How about the
anguish? And anguish just means that you're distressed or you're troubled, you're not happy, and no one's happy because they can see what's about to happen.
So in regards to what they're saying, can we tie the anguish to the anguish?
Can we tie anguish to angry? Okay, so we're way past time. We'll stop here and we'll try and tie these things up in our next class. We've got a few problems. Early Writings 41, is this talking about 1840 or 1848? It seems to be 1848, but the verse that she seems to be picking up is verse 25, and we've already tried to establish that verse 25 is 1840, so there's a discrepancy there. And Revelation 11:18, we normally apply that with radical Islam, and the reason we do that is because of what Brother Wilson was doing. He said the distress and the angering of the nations are the same thing. But in 1848, the angering of the nations was not Islam. It was a totally different issue. But the distress of nations, Luke 21:25, is Islam. And so we often make the distress, the anger, and we say that's 1840 and we say that's 9/11. So it's okay to make an application, but the way we've done that in the past, it's the primary application of the angering of the nations, which may be wrong. Looks like it might be wrong. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we ask and pray for a blessing upon our day. Help us, Lord, to be able to look at your word and try to come to a clear understanding of what it is that you're trying to teach us. Often when Alan White explains Bible passages, sometimes it doesn't make things as clear as we would like. Help us, Lord, to be able to come to a clear position, not only on what she says about a particular subject, but also what the original intent of those statements were. Be with us and bless us as we partake of our breakfast. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.